Hello, I thought it was about time to make this video. This video is just gonna be all one take, no editing. I figured I just wanna get everything out, talk about the entire experience. And for some of you, this might be the most important video you ever watch. This might be a video that saves your life. I wish that was an exaggeration. It is not. Let's get into it. We're gonna cover a few different things in this video. So one is we're gonna cover my experience with a septoplasty and turbinate reduction. We're going to cover some information on what the surgery was like, what the recovery was like. We are going to cover information on who might consider getting a surgery like that. And we'll cover information on empty nose syndrome, which is incredibly important to talk about as well. So let's jump into it. My name is Chris Petrone. I am 29 years old, and right now I'm making this video August 24th, Saturday, 2024. I got a septoplasty and bilateral inferior turbinate submucosal resection with microdebrider on May 22nd, 2024. So just about 3 months ago. I think when you count the weeks and days, it's actually more like 14 weeks or something like that. So a little over 3 months technically, even though the calendar date is pretty much 3 months. Anyway, let's start before the surgery. Before the surgery, I had a lot of nasal breathing issues. I would wake up with a dry mouth, I guess from mouth breathing, stuff like that. I had nasal valve collapse, which I still have. Right now in this moment, it varies throughout the day. Sometimes it's pretty obvious and you can just see my nostrils get sucked right into the middle. Other times it's pretty tolerable. I don't really think about it that much. Right now, I'm not really thinking about it that much. So that kind of varies. It's not severe. Some people, their nostrils are constantly being closed. But in general, I just had breathing issues. And so, I would wear a nose strip every single night, sometimes during the day as well. Even then, it wasn't really enough. There were still moments where I was like, dude, I'm wearing a nose strip. I did a saline rinse and I feel like shit. I just can't breathe through my nose. And so it was really bothering me for a long time. I went to see an ENT in Jacksonville, who came recommended from some followers of mine on social media. And we tried different medical treatments. Nasal spray, like we did Nasacort. We did like a budesonide or budenoside. I don't know I forgot what it's called, but it's like you put it in the saline and then you do a nasal rinse and it's medicated. So it helps to kind of like clear out whatever, reduce your turbinates or whatnot, or shrink them. And none of those medical treatments were effective for me. I tried and tried, but my breathing was just super annoying to me. And I said, I'm like, hey, I want surgery. I'm ready. Let's do this, And in my head, I was thinking my chief complaint was the nasal valve collapse. Sorry, I keep messing with my hair. Was the nasal collapse, like my nostrils sucking in when I breathe. That was my main complaint. I also knew that my turbinates, especially in this side, my inferior turbinates were big and pretty much touching my septum. And so I knew maybe something had to do with that as well, because even when I wore nose strips, like I said, I still had issues. So anyway, the doctor looked at me and he's like, yeah, you have some really inflamed turbinates or large turbinates, whatever he said, and you have a deviated septum. So, I know you're talking about the collapse of your nostrils, but we're going to go in there, we're going to fix your septum, we're going to reduce your turbinates, and that increase in airflow should prevent that suction from being so much of an issue for you. And I was like, okay, I guess, but I'm not the expert. He's the expert. Okay, cool. So I looked up turbinate reduction, and I stumbled upon empty nose syndrome, and then I read somewhere that a submucosal resection, because they're preserving the outer mucosa. Now, if you don't know, a submucosal resection is they kind of go in the turbinate and suction stuff out. They might resect the bone or the tissue or both, and it sucks it out, which reduces the size of the turbinate. But because they do it from the inside out, the outer mucosa is pretty much preserved, which drastically reduces the chances of getting empty nose syndrome. Now, that is true. It does reduce the chances of getting empty nose syndrome as compared to, say, just cutting out your inferior turbinates. Okay, cool. So I felt pretty confident with that procedure, and both the PA and the surgeon looked at my nose and they were like, damn, your turbinates are fucking massive, dude. And I was like, thanks, I grew them myself. So I felt pretty confident doing the surgery. I had a friend of mine in the healthcare world kind of do some snooping on the surgeon, and she's like, oh yeah, this guy's good. He's going to do a good job. So I said, okay, cool. And I was just so sick of my breathing. I was like, I want to get this surgery. And I watched a few videos. I watched that guy, I forgot his name, Living with the Neils or something like that. He made a couple of really nice videos about his experience with turbinate reduction and septoplasty, and he did an 8-month follow-up, said he was breathing a lot better. So I felt comfortable after watching some videos, reading up on stuff. I felt comfortable going with the surgery. The actual surgery process was pretty easy. You don't eat like 12 hours or so before the surgery. And I think that's because they don't want you to like shit yourself on the table when you're under anesthesia or something like that. Anyway, whatever the reasoning is, I didn't eat. And you need someone to drive you home from the surgery because you're going to be a little loopy on the anesthesia, or you might be. And so I got there, I did my paperwork, I signed things, and I remember signing things that was like, they were like pretty scary. And it was like, you understand the risks, you're paying this, da 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 da. And I'm like, fuck, man, all right. I was really nervous. I had my sister there, and I did it at a surgery center, not a hospital, which didn't bother me at all. Some people I think feel more comfortable doing it at a hospital. I was like, what's the difference? And they're like, nothing. Like the facility, like the what you have is the same. Like you're still gonna have all the tools and everything, and they're gonna do it. It's just, some people like the hospital. And I was like, no. Surgery center's fine, cool. So we did the surgery, and that was no big deal. I came out of anesthesia. One thing I remember when I came to is I was freezing cold. I was like shivering, like uncontrollably. It was very uncomfortable for 10 minutes probably. And they got me a blanket, like a nice warm blanket, and some apple juice. And I just remember being like kind of just in shock. And the nurse was like, do you want some apple juice? And I just go, I was trying to be a good patient, but I was kind of out of it. And I saw my sister, and she took a picture of me. That's where you see in some of my TikToks, I use that picture where I'm just like laying there and I'm like, out of it. We get my clothes back on. The nurse switches out my bandage, puts a new one on. She says, here, take this juice for the road, whatever, and I'm out of there. They wheel me out to the car. I get in the passenger seat, and I felt pretty decent. I was obviously a bit loopy, but I was still talking. I was listening to the music on the radio, and I was like, all right, this is just part of the process. I'm accepting the fact that I'm going to be kind of miserable for a couple weeks. Cool. Sister drove me home. It was 3 hours because I had moved in between the process of starting the whole surgery process and then actually having the surgery. I had moved 3 hours away. So my sister drove me all the way back. The night before, we got a pillow and a blanket for the car. It was pretty chill. Honestly, the car ride was fine. I was in a bit of pain, but nothing major. I think I still had a lot of medication in my system. And we had picked up the prescriptions ahead of time, so that was good. I had, I think, like Tylenol with oxy something for the pain. And then after that, they said, just take extra strength Tylenol. Cool. That day, we stopped at the gas station. I got out of the car, went to the bathroom, called my dad. I felt pretty good. Called my mom. And that night, we got back to the house. I was chopping vegetables for her. I felt pretty much with it and pretty good. It's really uncomfortable for a few nights because you're sleeping with your mouth open pretty much. You need to get a humidifier and use distilled water. So I had a humidifier going, and I was using xylitol spray for my throat to keep everything moist. It was uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. You got to get through it. After about 4 or 5 days, the intubation tube for breathing left in the back of my throat, kind of you guys ever bite the inside of your cheek? And you don't really feel it that much for a couple days, but then day 3 or 4, it starts to sting as it, anything that touches it, when anything acidic, salty, it stings. So day 6, 7, 8, 9, terrible. Every time I swallowed, it hurt. That from the intubation tube hurt the most. My nose, forget it. That was fine. It was easy. Piece of cake. The pain I felt from my nose, really nothing. I had medication to get through it. It was really not a big deal. The back of my throat, that was frustrating. That was painful and just constant because every time you swallow, it hurts. Really shitty 4 days, I would say. And that was 1 week post, so that sucked. Other than that, man, it was just sitting watching TV with my mom and sister. They came in to care of me for a few days, and it was just kind of doing that. I tried to go and do things, go for walks with them, and I got lightheaded. It was Florida in June, in May and June, so it's hot. And I wasn't able to do things like normally, and that's fine. You have to expect, you're going to have a couple weeks where you're rough. After a couple weeks, I started to get better. I started to feel good. I got back into the gym, starting out light and then progressing into more serious exercises later on. I was doing things normally. I felt congestion and I felt like my nasal breathing wasn't great, but I was able to do things, you know, and I was still sleeping with a nose strip at that time because you have crusting, you have stuff that lasts for weeks and even months after. Now is where we get to the part that you really need to, if you're going to watch any part of the video, this is it. You need to pay attention to this. This is extremely important, especially, well, both if you're considering to get this surgery or if you already have gotten this surgery. At about 7 or 8 weeks post-op, I woke up one day. I was sleeping on my left side, so I was getting air through the right. You tend to get air through the upper nostril because like the bottom one sort of like clogs up and whatever. That's just how it tends to go for anybody, healthy, normal noses, whatever. Now my right nostril was getting the air, but I woke up and I felt nothing. It felt like I couldn't sense the air going through my nose. It felt like I was suffocating. I would inhale, but I didn't feel it, and I panicked. I went into a kind of like what's described often as a fight or flight state. You know, you start to get heart palpitations where you feel and like hear your heart beating. Your blood rushes kind of like from your extremities to your core. Like if you've ever stood off a really high balcony or roof or something and looked down, woof, you get that like your heart drops kind of sensation. It was like that, but just ongoing all day because I was suffocating in a sense. And or I had the sensation I knew I was getting air. I could feel it. Like, you know, when you exhale, you put your finger there, you feel plenty of air coming out, but it doesn't feel like it. Something was severed from the nose to my brain, to my lungs, like all working together and saying, ding, 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 you're breathing. It just wasn't, that feedback wasn't coming in for me. And that's terrifying because I had heard of empty nose syndrome. And if you know about empty nose syndrome, you know that it ruins people's lives. And it's terrible. It's sad. And there are people who have taken their own life because of the suffering that they experience from empty nose syndrome. And so the fact that I was experiencing, I wasn't about to say empty nose syndrome, but I was experiencing a symptom of it, you know, an empty nose syndrome-like symptom. That was terrifying to me. And that put me in a really, really dark spiral because I struggle with like health anxiety or medical anxiety, and I have for some time, where any little thing I think the worst, and I perseverate on it, and it bothers me. And one thing you'll realize as you're searching this sort of stuff is that some of the symptoms that you get with empty nose syndrome and anxiety overlap, and they're similar. And so, was I experiencing a symptom of empty nose syndrome? Yes. Did my anxiety make it a lot worse? Also, yes. And it's a really terrible cycle. Also, the physical sensation that I was getting triggered the fight or flight state and a panic attack. And you can have no history of panic attacks, no history of excessive anxiety. But if you experience that sensation from your breathing, it doesn't matter. It's going to put you in that panic attack because it's your breathing. It's involuntary. This is why when you see people with empty nose syndrome, it's not something you can simply just think away. It's not something you can throw medication at and like, boom, it's gone. It's a physiological thing. And so I think in the past, for those of you who don't know what empty syndrome is, I encourage you to Google it and do a little bit of research. But basically, it's a result that it's something that can happen from turbinate surgery, where you don't sense that you're breathing. And there's 6 key symptoms of it. And you might experience some of them, all of them, none of them. Burning, so a sensation of burning when you inhale. Crusting, excessive nasal crusting in your nose. And I'm not talking about post-surgery crusting, that's normal. I'm talking about like crusting because of how dry your nose is, which leads us into symptom 3, dryness. People complain about excessive dryness in their nose. Suffocation is 4. Lack of airflow or a sense of diminished nasal airflow where you don't feel the air going through your nose. That's 5. And then 6 is your nose feels too open. Those are 6 symptoms that are highly correlated with empty nose syndrome. And then of course you experience things like panic attacks or that sense of doom, that impending doom where you just like nothing is okay, you know? And so for me, after that 7 or 8 week point where I started to experience that suffocation, that sense of my nose being too open, I would experience these panic attacks, this sense of impending doom, like nothing was fun, nothing was okay. Like I couldn't feel relaxed. I was constantly on edge 24/7. My sleep was affected. I was sleeping 2 hours, waking up 2 hours. I would try to go to bed. I would get to the verge of sleep and I would jolt awake because my body thinks that I'm suffocating. This was all incredibly, incredibly scary to me. And I saw a psychiatrist. I was put on Lexapro for the anxiety. I went to the ER. The ER doctor looked at my nose and he said, your turbinates are there. They look good. And whoever did the surgery did a good job. It looks very standard. And so that made me feel better, sure. But I was still experiencing these symptoms. I had no burning, no crusting, and no dryness. So that, taking 3 out of those 6 key symptoms off the block immediately made me feel pretty good. I was like, okay, at least I don't have like this full-blown empty nose syndrome. Now, what you do is, there's this thing called the ENS-6Q, the Empty Nose Syndrome 6-item questionnaire, developed by, I think, Dr. Nyack up in Stanford, whatever, Northern California somewhere, Palo Alto. And what you do is you take those 6 symptoms and you rate them on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being no issue, 1 being very mild, 2 being mild, 3 moderate, 4 severe, 5 very severe. You add up the sum of all those, and if it's 11 to 30, it's likely that you have empty nose syndrome and you should get diagnosed by an empty nose syndrome aware ENT. If you have 0 to 5, that's normal. And if you have 6 to 10, it's like, I don't know, we'll see. For me, at the height of my panic when I started, I was like a 13, 14, maybe 15. And that's empty nose syndrome. That's on the milder side of that 11 to 30, yes. But, it was miserable for me. After my panic subsided, maybe after the Lexapro kicked in. I was in Florida at the time. I came up to New York, which is where I am now, living with my mom and my sister and my brother and his girlfriend. When I came here, I calmed down significantly. And from that point on, my symptoms, my ENS6Q score pretty much was in that 8 or 9 range, maybe 10 or 11. Then I realized, some days I'm hitting a 6 or 7. Cool. And it stayed in that 6 to 10 range, and it varies. And that's the thing about these symptoms, especially in the 6 to 12 months after your recovery, after your surgery. They can vary a lot. So there were times of the day where I felt like, I'm like a 10, 11, I'm really uncomfortable, this is scary. Then there were times of the day where I'm like, am I at a 5? I might be at a 5. I feel pretty much normal. I was cooking dinner, dancing around. I'm like, and so here's the thing. Empty nose syndrome, which I have not been diagnosed for, and I don't think I have. Let me be clear with that. Empty nose syndrome can vary in how it feels throughout the day, but also you can get empty nose syndrome from any turbinate surgery. That includes submucosal resection, radiofrequency ablation, obviously slicing into the turbinate and taking it out, which I hope that isn't done anymore, but if a doctor says to you, empty nose syndrome, we do these newer methods, so you can't get empty nose syndrome. That is bullshit. That is not true. You can get empty nose syndrome from any turbinate surgery, including also out fracture. You can get empty nose syndrome from that. In my opinion, no one should get turbinate reduction. I shouldn't say no one. The vast majority of people should not get turbinate reduction surgery. I would rather wear a nose strip all day, every day, for the rest of my life than ever have to go through what I went through with those feelings of suffocation, the feeling of your nose being too open, the panic attacks, the constantly feeling on edge. It is terrifying. I thought I did not have ideations of self-harm, but I had ideations of a future in which I would want to do something like that, if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say is I thought my life was ruined. I was terrified. I thought that I was experiencing the beginning of empty nose syndrome. I've had 5. So right now we're about approximately 3 months. I think we're more like 14 weeks out from my surgery. And I've had a fantastic week. This past week has been pretty much normal for me. I feel very close to normal, with a very occasional sensation of feeling like my nose is too open. But I spoke to a doctor from one of Dr. Nassif's associates out in California from the show Botched. Not Dr. Nassif, but one of his associates. And he was very good. And he said, it sounds to me like you're going to continue to improve slowly over time because it's only been a few months post-surgery. Tons of people experience healing from that 6 to 12 month point and even beyond. He's like, your turbinates are going to sort of swell up a bit, like back, and that should create the proper sensation of volume. And as the nerves heal, as everything heals over time, you're going to feel more normal. And you're going to have more good days than bad days until eventually you don't have bad days. And I was like, I said, cool, thank you. Like, that was really reassuring to me. And I agree, because that seems to be the trend for me. So I'm making this video now because I feel like I've sort of come out of the trench a little bit. And you ever see like those videos where they like release a mountain lion back into the wild and it runs out, but it like stops and it like looks around and it's like, what's the catch? That's how I feel right now, because I've had a great week, but I'm kind of like waiting for the shoe to drop, you know? I feel good, man. I'm optimistic. So in my position, my symptoms have pretty much subsided. I took a stack of vitamins every day and I continue to do so. I still take my Lexapro, I take fish oil, I take NAD+, I take lion's mane, I take vitamin D, which I was supposed to take anyway already, and I take B12. So I take those vitamins every day, and I have been for the past several weeks. I don't know if vitamins work. I don't know if they do anything. But I was absolutely terrified, and I was like, I'm going to throw everything at this that I possibly can. I posted on the subreddit. I posted on the Facebook group. There are some amazing people out there. Shout out to Marison on Reddit. I think his name is Richard Mason, or I don't know. It's like some German last name, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but he was incredible. He made the ENS Self-Help Guide, which I'll link in the description here. There's really dedicated people out there, and I think we need to raise awareness for this sort of stuff. I want to say a few things. One, the vast majority of people who get a septoplasty and even turbinate reduction say that it changes their lives for the better. A lot of people are happy with these surgeries, and I don't want to take away from their stories, because I think for many people, they experience a really positive outcome. For me, if any loved one of mine wanted to get a turbinate reduction, I would highly advise them against it. I'd be like, fuck no, dude, no. Because you'd rather, I promise you, you would rather wear a nose strip all day, every day for the rest of your life than get empty nose syndrome. I want some of you to think extremely, extremely hard about this, whether or not you really need this surgery. Like, have you thrown everything at this issue? Have you tried every spray, every medication, every routine with your doctor? You might be the type of person who needs to do a nasal rinse every single night before you go to bed. Before the surgery, I don't know if it's being raised on video games or whatever, or having a generally good health history. I thought life was like a video game. I thought, I have this issue with my nose. I could snap my fingers, modern medicine, it'll be fixed. And that's not the case. We don't understand turbinates well enough. There are still doctors out there who think empty nose syndrome is a psychological thing. It's a physiological thing. It's a root cause. The root cause is biological. It's your tissue. It's not a mental thing that you can just throw some medication at. It's not, they'll gaslight you into thinking you're really anxious. Oh, you're just anxious. You can breathe. It's fine. Your nose is wide open. It's not something you can just look at and see the turbinates and say, oh, you don't have empty nose syndrome. It's not that simple. There's a study that was done that said a certain percentage of people have a certain vein running through their turbinates. And when you do a certain procedure, it might, I'm forgetting the percentage. I'll try and find the studies and link to them. But for example, you might do the procedure on 100 people, and 85% of those people who don't have that vein in that spot are going to be fine. But that 15% of people who have that particular vein in that spot, or that nerve or whatever, they're going to end up with empty nose syndrome. And it's not that the procedure was wrong. It's that we don't understand the anatomy of the turbinates well enough to look for that certain thing. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is that modern medicine is great. It really is. However, we don't have all the answers, and there are still things to this day that we do that doctors just can't explain. These are seemingly really educated, intelligent people, and it's like, for example, Dr. Nyack, one of the leading guys in the United States and probably the world who studies empty nose syndrome and treats patients of empty nose syndrome, said on an interview, I think from earlier this year, he has operated on 3,000 turbinates, and this is at that time, so it's probably more now, and he's caused empty nose syndrome in 3 of those turbinates, one side, not 3 of those, not 3,000 patients, but 3,000 turbinates, so maybe 1,500 patients for 3 nostrils that experienced empty nose syndrome. That's about a 1 in 1,000 chance. Now, I need you to remember that a lot of people with empty nose syndrome take their own lives, or have suicidal thoughts, or their lives are ruined and they're bound to their apartment for life. Do you want to roll a 1 in 1,000 chance of that happening to you? I mean, look, you're an adult, you can make your own choices, but all I'm saying is I would never get turbinate surgery again, and knowing what I know now, I should not have done it. And if any loved one of mine said they're thinking about it, I would highly advise them against turbinate surgery of any kind, including out fracture, including submucosal resection, including radiofrequency ablation. I don't think turbinate surgery is going to be good. I think turbinate surgery is going to turn out in the next 20 years, maybe more, maybe less, to be one of those things that we are shocked that we allowed people to continue to do. And we just treat it like, oh yeah, we'll just reduce your turbinates. Oh, your nostrils are wide open now. No, it is far more risky than that. And people will come in my comments, I'm sure, and say it really helped me, and I'm sure it did. That doesn't mean that the risk is any less because it helped you. And you know what? To be honest with you, I think I'm going to come out of this breathing better than I ever have. I do breathe better than I ever have. I still would not do it again. If I could go back, I would. I thought my life was ruined. I thought my life was over. And it's something I never would want to wish on anybody. I would highly advise against getting turbinate reduction for the vast majority of you. Septoplasty, I think just a septoplasty alone is significantly safer. I've heard of people saying that they've experienced empty nose syndrome from a septoplasty alone. I don't know enough about that to comment on that, but I would say that it's significantly safer if you don't touch your turbinates. You know, some of you have a jacked up septum. You probably need a septoplasty. Others, you might have a slightly jacked septum. You might not need anything. I urge you, and if you had asked me before, I would have said, I don't want to be on a nasal spray every day for the rest of my life. If I could go back in time, I'd smack myself and be like, you fucking idiot. Like you would much rather be on a nasal spray every day for the rest of your life than want to die. You know? Just don't do it. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, do whatever you want. You're an adult. You can make your own choices. You can assess the risks for yourself. I wouldn't do it for 99.9% of you. Yeah, and I did not know the risks of this, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about empty nose syndrome and turbinate procedures. And I would just urge all of you to do plenty of research, because it's no joke. If you're someone struggling with the symptoms of empty nose syndrome right now, following a surgery, I would tell you a few things. One, I would get on a vitamin stack. I don't know if vitamins help anything, but it can't hurt. And if you can swing the money, just do it. Just do it. Two, I would highly consider getting on anxiety or depression medicine. It can help a lot with some of the mental symptoms that you're feeling. Three, book appointments with Dr. Sitardi at the University of Houston, Texas, I think, or University of Texas, Houston. And go see an ENS aware ENT. There's a map on the subreddit. I'll put some links below of ENS aware ENTs that you can go to see. Some of them can do a cotton test on you to check and see if that helps your symptoms. And I would say have some faith for two things. One, lots of people experience natural healing from these symptoms in the first 6 to 12 months. I've read dozens of stories of people saying they had suffocation for like 3 months, 4 months. And then they say, yeah, at like the 6, 7, 8 month point after surgery, those symptoms just started to go away. I've even read people as far out as 16 months, 17 months, 18 months saying, yeah, I had like a terrible year of panic attacks and suffocation. And then those symptoms went away. And now at 30 months later, I have none of those. And it's like, damn, dude, like people experience a lot of healing in that first year, that second year, even that third year. And so I think it's important to have as much faith as you possibly can and optimism about the process, especially if you're in the first 6 months, especially, you know. But it is scary and it's terrifying, and I understand what you're going through if you're one of those people. A lot of people have experienced that natural healing. A lot of people also found that implants or injections have helped them a lot. I think the most studied one with the best results is the inferior meatus augmentation procedure, which is rib cartilage, predominantly done by Nyack, Dr. Nyack. I think people also like the injections that Dr. Sitardi do, which I think might be some sort of collagen matrix or something. It helps add volume to your turbinates. I would encourage all of you to wait at least 12 months before doing any sort of procedure like that, though. Because again, you might experience natural healing, and what you don't want is to get some sort of augmentation or injection in your turbinates to only then regret it later when your turbinates kind of swell back up a bit. Now, your turbinates will not regrow per se, but the tissue can hypertrophy back up to add more volume over time. So there's an important distinction to make there. It's like the bone resected is not going to regrow. The mucosal tissue is not just going to magically like come back. But again, that it's tissue kind of like a muscle where it can hypertrophy again and swell and expand. And so that might do the trick for many of you. Nerve damage takes months to heal. Months, you know. There's, again, tons of people who say, oh yes, 7 months in and all those symptoms started to go away. So have some faith about that as well. For those of you considering a septoplasty and turbinate reduction, don't get a turbinate reduction. Like, you need to be so severe to even consider that, where your turbinates are literally blocking your airways, touching your septum on both sides. Like, my turbinate was touching my septum on this side, not 24/7, but a lot of the time. I think if I was to go back and if I was to do anything, I would be very selective about the doctor, and I would maybe do a submucosal resection on that one side, very, very slightly, like a slight reduction, maybe if anything. All right, that's pretty much all I have. I'm sorry if I forgot anything. Biggest takeaway, let's just run through real quick. 1, don't get a turbinate reduction. Don't do it. 99.9% of you, don't do it. Because you'd rather wear a nose strip every day for the rest of your life, use a nasal spray every day for the rest of your life, do saline rinses every day for the rest of your life, than die. Plain and simple. I wish I was exaggerating. I'm not. Like, I think this video might save some people's lives. 2, you will hear that empty nose syndrome is super rare, and it is super rare. It is not as rare as they say, though. It's just not. It's underreported, it's under-recognized, and you can get empty nose syndrome years after a turbinate surgery. In fact, I still have this dark cloud looming over me, thinking that it might come back one day. It's fucking terrifying. The way I reconcile that with myself is I could get hit by a bus one day, too. You're more likely to get into a car accident than get empty nose syndrome. So I have a lot of optimism and faith. 3, if you have to get a surgery, I would say just a septoplasty. 4, you can get empty nose syndrome from any type of turbinate surgery, including radiofrequency ablation, including submucosal resection, including out fracture. It's just a fact. Anybody who tells you otherwise is a fucking idiot. Don't listen to them. This has been studied. It's documented in studies, peer-reviewed, meta-analyses. It's just fact, period. And then if you're in that, especially in that first 6 months, but even in that first year or more, and you're experiencing some of these symptoms, understand that natural healing can take place. And you need to give your body a fighting chance. So for me, that was getting on Lexapro. That was getting out and doing things with my friends. That was exercising. That was eating. You know, you need to give your body a fighting chance. All right, guys, I love you dearly. I'm trying to help you guys out here. Normally I talk about how to organize your bathroom or organize your home or all those things, but in this video, I wanted to be helping you guys in another way from something that I went through. So I'm telling you, what I experienced is something that people experience permanently, ongoing for the rest of their lives. And yeah, it's terrifying. And so I just want to try and potentially save a few of you guys from going through that, even if it is temporarily, like it was in my case. So thank you guys for listening. I genuinely think for some of you, this will be the most important video you've ever watched. And I wish it wasn't. I wish I didn't have to make this video, but there you go. Thank you guys for watching. Love you all. I will be in the comments section, and check out the links down below that I'm going to eventually put there, because they'll have some good resources and information about the surgery and about empty nose syndrome. Would I do the surgery again? No. All right.